Hello and welcome to this beginner series programming Python and 3. In this video we're going to take our first look at loops, very important construct in any programming language. In Python it's a pretty simple concept, and I just want to quickly go through the two main types. We have something called a for loop and something called a while loop. So let's take a look at a for loop. Again, as always, I'm in a new file, a new script I've made. I'll assume if you've watched the previous videos you know how to run the script. I've got my command prompt open on the right hand side here. The first thing I want to look at is something called a for loop and how it works. So what we do is we might have a list of something. We haven't covered lists yet, we will in other videos, but we'll have a collection of something. Like a word is a list of characters, and that's also known as a range. And what we want is a way of going through each of the items in our list, let's say, or through our range, or each of the characters in our word. And to do that we can use a for loop. The way it works in Python is actually very simple. I can say for, and I'll call this let, for letter, in, and let's use the string hello. And then I get the double point. And just like with the if and else if, when I get the double point, any of the code now that's indented below this double point will be executed as part of this loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print let and save. So what do we have here then? What we're saying here is for each of the letters in this string, let will be declared as is declared as a variable, and we'll have each in turn its value set to the letter in the string. So in the first loop it will be H, then it will be E, then L, then O. And all of the code that is indented with a tab after the double point will be executed for each of the letters in this string, and those are known as loops. So in this case we'll get 5 loops. So I just run this complicated program that we've just written then with this loop. Let's just run Python chapter 7 loops.py, and you see that we get loops printed because that's on line 1, and then we get HELLO printed, this print being executed for each one of the letters, and each time the loop runs, let is set to the value of one of the letters inside the loop. I can also, for instance, make a counter here, so I'll set a new variable called count and set that equal to 0. And now what I'll do is I'll increment count, and I'll also print then the value of count. And if I rerun the program, you see we get H, loop 1, E is loop 2, L is loop 3, L is loop 4, and O is loop 5. So the concept itself is very powerful, but it's actually very simple. There are two things that you need to know that go inside for loops very often. One is called a break and one is called a continue. So a break I'll look at first. A break can be used to actually exit a loop early under a certain condition maybe that you specify, or even no condition. For instance, if I type break just after the count here, what this tells Python is to exit this loop irrelevant of how far we are through the loop. And what we'll actually get here is just H printed to the console and then break, so we won't execute the code with the loop here. We'll just get H printed and we're at the end of the program. I'll just print at the bottom here something to signal done. And now if I execute my code, you see I get loops, the H, and then done. I don't even print the count because we've put break in here to say we want to exit the loop early. A more common way of doing this, because it's pretty useless like that, we always exit the loop, will be to say something, for example, that if our letter is equal to L, break from the loop. Now if I rerun the program, we see that we get H, E, L. We don't get the loop number printed because we've broken at the first L, we've exited our loop. Another construct inside loops is something called the continue. If I replace break now with continue, what this says to Python is to go to the next loop in this for loop without executing any of the further code inside the loop. So the effect will be, if we've got an L, we won't print, and let's change this actually to an E because we've got 2 L's in hello. If we've got an E, then we won't print the loop count. So we should get H in loop 1, then E and nothing else, then L, loop 3, L loop 4, and O loop 5. So I'll just rerun the program. And you can see that we get loops, then H loop 1, E, and because E, this if statement is true when let is E, then we continue. We don't print the loop number, so we get then an L on the next loop and a 3, an L, a 4, and an O and a 5, etc. And that's basically all there is to for loops. a really, really powerful thing, obviously in programming, but from a construct point of view, quite simple. The only thing to remember is the functionality really of the break and the continue. One other very popular constructor you'll see in Python is something called a range. Now, I've opened here the documentation. You can see on the link at the top here where I am. It says here, range type represents an immutable sequence of numbers, is commonly used for looping specific number of times in for loops. Now, it's actually a class. I'm not going to go into the details here. The main thing to know is a range, we can specify a start and a stop. The stop isn't included, and a step, and you'll often see this used in for loops. So let's have a very quick look at range. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave let as it is, but now I'm going to say let in range, and then I'm going to do 0 and 10 here. Let's carry on printing let and just take out all of the code we've got inside there. So I just want to demo ranges, and now run the program. And then we get 0 up until including 9, but not the 10. So when we ask for a range, we go a bit like with indexing in strings, from and including the first number, but not up to, but not including the second number. And actually range takes a third argument, which is the step. So we can say we want every 3 numbers in this range here. And now we get 0, 3, 6, and 9. We can also go the other way. We have to make sure that we start higher than we finish. So I'll go from 10 to 0, and this time we won't include the 0. And I now say that my step is going to be -1, so we're going to drop down, and we get 10, 9, etc. all the way down to 1, but we don't include the 0. And we can step by -2, -3, -4, etc, etc. And that's principally how a range works. The other type of loop we have in Python is known as the while loop. Now these can be dangerous because if you're not careful you can end up in what's called an infinite loop. But here we'll say that while count is less than 10, execute the code that's indented below the double point here, just like for the for or for an if or an else or something like that. And here, these loops keep executing whilst the statement after the while here remains valid. Now when we first start, count is 1. So we'll increment count, and now we'll print count. And when that's printed, then the loop we've finished our code here that belongs to the loop, so we've just got the done remaining. Then we'll print at the start, count will become 1, then we'll print 1, and then the while will check, is the loop still valid? Yes it is, and carry on until count is no longer less than 10. So let's have a look at this program running then. And now we can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you might say to yourself, well, how's that possible? We've said only run the loop whilst count is less than 10. If I lower the value or restriction on count here to 3, it can make the logic slightly easier. I'll just rerun the program. So we get 1, 2, and 3. So why do we get to 3 here? It may be clear to you already, but in case not, I'm just going to explain it. So we start off with count is 0. So this statement after the while is true. So we execute the loop. Count is now 1, and we print 1 to the console, which is what we see. Now check whether the conditions are valid. They are. Count is 1, it's less than 3. Now count becomes 2, and we print 2 to the console. Now we do another check, and count is still less than 3, it's 2. Now count becomes 3, and we print 3 to the console. And then we do a check, and the statement's no longer true, so we don't execute any more code in the loop, and we drop and print the done. And it's just something you've got to be careful of with while loops is one, that you increment count, otherwise you'll be in looping forever. And the other one, of course, is that you make sure that your statement here that has to be true doesn't contain any nasty tricks inside where actually you do one more loop maybe than you're imagining. And this is a classic example of where, particularly when people are starting out with coding, they end up doing more loops than they think they're actually going to be doing. Okay then, so that's actually it for this video. A quick explanation of while loops and for loops. They're relatively straightforward. Oh, in the while you can also put break and continue just as with the for. In the next video we'll actually put these to use with an actual program that does something. So thanks very much for watching. Any questions, comments, welcome as always on YouTube. Otherwise, see you in the next one.